Hey everybody, this is Jeremy Siskind. I'm the author of this book, Playing Solo Jazz Piano. And today I want to talk with you about something you've probably heard, which is that jazz pianists should make melodies with their comping, that their comping should be melodic, particularly the top note of your comping should be melodic. But I think for a lot of students of jazz piano, you're often left kind of wondering how. And I want to give you some tips today to help make that top voice melodic. But first, let me comp a couple choruses of the blues so that you can listen to the top note and see kind of what I mean when I say that I want the comping to be melodic. I don't know why I'm wearing earphones, so here goes. Okay, so it's not a melody, in the sense that it's going to be the chief melody of the piece, but hopefully it's providing a little bit of kind of a counter melody to whatever the soloist is doing or whatever's happening in the melody, in the main melody, I mean. So I've got a list of 7 ways that you can make your melodies, make your comping more melodic. So here goes. The first is using sidestep and tonicization. So these are 2 really important concepts in comping. Jazz pianists who only play the actual chords of the piece are missing out on lots of chances to add color, to add motion, to add a sense of forward momentum. And these, to my knowledge at least, are kind of the 2 principal ways that you're going to add in chords that aren't listed on the lead sheet. So the first is sidestepping. And if I have an F7, sidestepping means that I'm going to take each and every one of these notes and I'm going to move them a half step in either direction to the adjacent note. So for example, I could go from F7 to E7 and back to F7, right? Or I could go from this same voicing, I'm moving every note up a half step and then back down. I'm going to tell you about tonicization and I'll show you a couple of ways that you can use these scales because they're kind of from the same category for me. So tonicization means adding in a dominant chord before whatever chord you might be playing. So if you're playing an F7, you can add in a C altered, or a C7, but we like to add alterations to our dominant 7th. So I'm going from E flat, A, D, G, C, to a C7, and back. And whenever we have a dominant chord leading somewhere, we can have the tritone sub instead. So we could actually use F sharp 7, which is one of our possible side steps. So that actually kind of works out pretty nicely. So a couple ways that you can use these 2 devices. One is, starting on F7. We could do just what I'm demonstrating. Play the F7 once, do a sidestep or tonicization, and come back to it. Probably heard stuff like that, and you could hear that makes a little melody. Or you can lead into the chord using a sidestep or tonicization. So for example, if we're going from this F7 to B flat 7, I'm doing a little sidestep. I'm figuring out what my B flat 7 voicing is going to be, and then I'm going in from a half step above. Creates a little bit of motion. Or after the chord happens, you can still slide in by a sidestep or tonicization. So I'll give you like 1, 2, 3, 4. See here what I did there? I'll do it in slow motion. 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'm doing a tonicization. It's coming in after the beat, but it's kind of coming without that original chord first. It might not happen, in a chord progression that's moving quickly, but on a longer chord progression, you might do multiple side steps or tonicizations, right? safely and with some rhythmic emphasis to the original chord, then you are certainly welcome to do multiple sidesteps or tonicizations in a row. So those are great ways to make mostly half-step melodies on the top. With a sidestep, of course, it's always going to be half-step. With a tonicization, you could use a whole step. Or even, there I'm going from an F7 to a C7 with a sharp 9. So that's kind of neat. A second device that you can use is putting in an inversion. Or if you're a person who uses the type A, type B voicing system, you can flip back and forth between type A and type B. So, if I'm chilling on F for a second, maybe I'll have the 7th on the bottom, and the 5th on top, let's just say. And then I can go up, come back. I just added in a little sidestep there, right? And sometimes it's not a matter of changing necessarily voicing type or inversion, but changing how many notes you have, right? I can go from a 5-note voicing, this is for a C7, E, B flat, E flat or D sharp, A flat or G sharp, D flat, and then I could grab the bottom note and have a 6-note voicing. I think we're about to talk about that. But for now, let's just think about essentially going from a voicing with the 3rd on the bottom to the voicing with the 7th on bottom, or vice versa. That can kind of just launch something melodically. But what I was just talking about here was maybe taking off or adding a top note to the voicing. So let's pretend I'm on F7. I've got my 7th, 3rd on bottom, 13th, 9th, 5th, and root. Sometimes I have my fingers like way on the edge of the keys and I realize nobody can see them. So check out what I can do just by taking off this top note. I can make this little melody. Ba ba do da. So I'm essentially going from maybe a 5-note voicing to a 6-note voicing back to a 5. And it's creating just a little melody. Just think if we add this to maybe a sidestep. We can start making, not the most amazing melodies, but these are little 3 or 4-note melodies that are really nice. So think about just taking off the top note. You could take off 2 notes, but then it gets to be this really big melody, right? If I go, to me, that's a little bit too much difference between the 6-note voicing and the 4-note voicing. They just don't really sound like they're the same. So personally, I would just take off or add 1 note. And then you can add or change your alterations. And I'll add to this that you could add or change kind of your color tones. So for example, if you're on a C7 like this, I got my 3rd and 7th is pretty much always on bottom for me, right? And then I could have my sharp 9 on top, but then I could alternate with the flat 9. That creates a little melody. Or even, if I'm really getting crazy, I could alternate the sharp 9 with a natural 9 too. Right? What might be interesting to some of you to watching my voicing is I'm keeping the sharp 9, even when I have the natural 9 up here. And out of context, this doesn't sound very good, does it? But in context, it sounds okay. It's amazing how much difference context can make. Right? So you've got kind of 4 notes to play with up there between the sharp 9, the natural 9, the flat 9, and then the root of the chord. Same thing around kind of this area with the sharp 5, the natural 5, the 13th, the flat 5. You know, you can really just everything between F and B is going to be good on a C dominant. So there, I don't have to change anything about my underlying voicing like I do when I'm doing the sidestep or the tonicization. I'm just changing maybe from a sharp 5 to a flat 5. And it doesn't have to be alterations either. You know, we could change color notes from, let's say, from the 13th. I'll go back to an F7 here. So we're on the 1 chord of the blues. So I'll use the 13th on top, and then the 5th. You know, and we're going to risk doubling, but we could even use the dominant 7th. Okay. Cool. So now these next 3 are actual voicing types that you can use to accentuate the melodies on the top. And I've gone over these voicings other places in the channel, so I'm going to give you a slightly brief version of these, but just to remind you that these are potential, you know, strategies. So the first is pentatonic voicings. And I had a student in recently who described the pentatonic voicings better than I did, which isn't saying much. But, you know, if we have an F pentatonic scale, right, and if you don't know your pentatonic scale, it's the 1, 2, 3, 5, 6. We can form voicings by taking every other note. So we're skipping one note in between. And we get these voicings that are some combination of thirds and fourths. I'll do that slower for you and deeper into the keys so you can see it. And you can see how you could use this technique to create some interesting movement on top. Altering them to have some E flats in there, because if they don't have E flats for this dominant 7th, it's not going to sound like a dominant 7th. Those can be really melodic. And again, think about combining those with some side steps. Tonicization at the end there, F, B flat. And that gives me the opportunity to have that nice motion on top. Other modal voicings, and modal voicings, you know, the 2 most common ones, and I did a video about this recently, so go ahead and check it out. The 2 most common ones historically are so what and chordal voicings. But you could take any voicing. If I have this F7 voicing, this does happen to be chordal, E flat, A, D, G, C. If we take it up and down the Mixolydian mode, all of a sudden it's functioning like a modal voicing. I'll give you an example that's not chordal. This is not chordal at all. I have E flat, G, A, C, D, F. So I can just move this up the mode. And then I can make any kind of melody I want with a modal voicing. You know, modal voicings are tailor-made for melodies. So again, all I'm doing is I'm thinking about F Mixolydian, and whatever voicing I have, I'm just going to move each and every note up in that scale or down in that scale. And you can create lots of melodies that way. And then, lastly, shearing or drop two voicings. And these, again, these voicings are made for harmonizing melodies. I did a very long voicing on shearing or closed position voicings that I'm happy to link for you. But the basic idea here is that for shearing or closed position voicings, those are the same thing. You're going to keep the top note the same as the bottom note. And this is really great for a very tonal or old-fashioned kind of sounding style. If you want it to sound like a big band background, which is kind of a nice way to think about comping sometimes, you can use these shearing voicings. And, you know, there's a lot to talk about, but we can essentially alternate between 6 chords, major 6 chords, and diminished chords. If I'm going to comp on a blues using closed position or shearing voicings, I'm essentially just playing simple melodies that focus on the chord tones so that we can still hear the chords. But I'm really thinking super melodically, right? And drop two are very similar. In drop two, the lowest note is usually a 10th or sometimes a 9th below the top. And this sounds a little bit more modern, but still essentially sounds like a big band background. And I would use these the same way. So I'm just playing simple melodies that would make nice accompaniments. And I am then harmonizing them with these drop two voicings. So I will reveal all of these tips here. So we've got sidestep and tonicization, inversions or changing from type A to type B, taking off the top note to create a little melody, adding or changing the alterations, or I'll add the color notes. And then these 3 other voicing types: pentatonic voicings, modal voicings, and shearing or drop two voicings. Again, my name's Jeremy Siskind. I would love it if you bought my book, Playing Solo Jazz Piano. You can get it on jeremysiskind.com. Thanks so much for tuning in. Like, comment. I'll see you next time.